Welcome everyone. Today I thought I'd go over some commonly overlooked performance variables for PvP. And that is your options settings, HUD, keybinds, how good your gaming equipment is, launcher settings, internet connection, and server connection. Changing these things can make Neverwinter feel like a totally different game, and significantly improve your quality of life. So it's no wonder that you'd want to optimize them. These can significantly impact your reaction time in particular. First up, we have option settings and keybinds. If you look at mouse look sensitivity here, you can see that mine isn't set to default. I changed mine to make it more sensitive. I recommend doing the same if you find your camera moves a little slow for your liking. Sadly, mouse look sensitivity doesn't affect how fast your character can turn, nor does this game allow you to change that. Mouse look sensitivity only affects how fast your camera can turn. Now this makes sense when you consider that being able to turn your character faster would probably cause significant inequality issues between players. That said, it's also true that Neverwinter isn't exactly consistent about caring about inequality between players. From there, you should look through the Keybinds panel and change anything you don't like. For optimizing your PvP settings, I highly recommend you change your utility power keybind to one of the side buttons on your mouse. This assumes you have a gaming mouse instead of a standard mouse. Not all mice have those extra buttons. I've personally been using mouse button 4 for years. Whatever keybind you pick for your utility power in PvP should be a single press option. These are the safest to use in PvP. Unfortunately, Neverwinter lacks the option to remove the original double tap a movement key to dodge keybinds. So you'll still occasionally double tap your movement keys by accident and dodge when you didn't want to. This aggravating mistake can significantly slow down an experienced player when they attempt time-sensitive rotations and node saves in a PvP setting. It also occasionally flings players off of platforms in PvE content. The next thing you should definitely change is your Autorun Keybind. This keybind is the fucking devil in PvP. The last thing you want is to find yourself auto-running in the middle of a riveting PvP match, while banging on random keys in a panic trying to make it stop. I recommend leaving your auto-run keybind blank, but you could also move it to a faraway key you don't use. As a word of caution, auto-run and auto-attack can be buggy, and there's a tiny chance of it still happening even when you change the keybind or disable them. The next thing you want to consider adjusting are the keybinds for your zoom in and zoom out settings. A lot of people do use these, and they are also good in PvP. Last I checked, they are bound to people's mouse wheel up and down scroll by default. There is another good custom option you could put on your mouse wheel up and down scroll instead of this though. If you look at the text block on the screen, here is that alternative. If you ever use hard target lock, the smoothest place to put it is on your mouse wheel. Doing that lets you toggle hard target lock on and off like a light switch. Note that hard target lock can be considered a cheat when it is used by shielding classes. Hard target lock A hard target lock is somewhat dangerous to wield in group-oriented PvP content, though. It forces you to face your target at all times, which can be disorienting and make you vulnerable to attacks from other enemy players. These zoom in and out commands notably aren't the only way to change the camera distance from your character. There is another, older command that lets you change your FOV. If you look at the text block on the screen again, you can see that I changed it to provide this older command. If you are like me and you want it to feel like you are covering more distance faster when you run, I recommend mixing the FOV command with the zoom in and out command. This will make the world less compact, which produces the illusion of moving faster and covering more distance. On the downside, increasing your FOV a lot can cause distance distortion issues on the sides of your screen, and it also flattens out your mounts, making them appear less rounded. I recommend 100 FOV combined with zooming out to the maximum for an optimal PvP layout. But zooming back in 4 or 5 times also looks good. Next, I recommend checking your potion slot keybinds in the options menu to see if you'd like to change those or not. I changed mine to 5, 6, and 7. Generally, you want your mount up command to be really accessible. I'd recommend changing it to 4 instead of the default of 7 like I did here. Notably, the Bard class may require special attention for its keybinds. The Bard class apparently has macros as well for it, but I don't know if those could be flagged for a ban wave or not, so proceed with caution for that. As a heads up, there used to be something called the streaming menu. I think it was default bound to Shift plus S. I couldn't find that when I scrolled through the options panel, but just in case that landmine of a command I couldn't find that when I scrolled through the options panel, but just in case that landmine of a command still exists, I highly recommend unbinding that or changing it to an obscure double press combination of keys you'd never hit by accident. The last time I accidentally opened the streaming menu, it completely hog-tied my keyboard, and I had to redo all of my binds. As some more useful keybinds I recommend, look at the text on the screen again. Those are some more useful keybinds you can add. Those first two are custom message chat binds. Whenever I press F9 or F10, it types a pre-written message into party chat. Notably, this kind of bind can be very finicky to apply. I'd recommend copying the text for them from a saved email. For some reason that sometimes works. Also make sure to include the quotation marks. I am going to put my written guide to custom chat binds in the video description for you guys, which explains a lot more about how to do those and also teaches you how to bind to several other chat channels, not just party chat. The next bind on that list is the instant death command. If you ever need to kill your character, you can click the key that you bound this command to and you will see a prompt appear on your screen. You can click OK and you'll die and respawn. Next up, we have the activate an item from your inventory command. This essentially allows you to use inventory slots as though they were belt slots. With some limitations the devs put in place for specific items, of course. I personally use this command to activate portable altars. If you change the last number in that command, that changes the slot you are binding to. 0 is the first slot in your first bag. Next up, we have the net graph toggle on and off commands. These let you check your ping. If the green bars that appear are really tall, that is a bad thing from what I understand. You want the bars to be really short. Moving on to the audio tab in your options settings. I recommend checking if your voice chat settings are correct. Pretty much nobody actually uses the in-game voice chat, so I'd recommend checking the disable voice chat box. If you do plan to use voice chat, make sure to check that your input and output devices are correct. Another important setting is your FX volume. FX volume controls attack sound effects and the sound effects characters make when they run. You'll want to make sure this is set high enough when PvPing. Next, let's go to the display tab. You'll want to make sure your resolution is high enough. And also check if the first 4 options up here are correct or not. You'll want your full screen refresh rate to be the highest your monitor can handle. Your resolution should match your monitor most likely. Moving on to the graphics tab. This is a very important tab in PvP. If you have severe lag problems, you may want to consider turning these 2 graphics sliders way down. You also may need to turn the max physics debris setting all the way down to 0. For most players, however, I don't actually recommend turning your graphics down. Instead, I recommend most players to turn their graphics sliders all the way up. This makes everything prettier, but more importantly, it also allows you to see a lot more clinging power visuals that are important in PvP, such as the purple trail from Shadow Strike. And the black splotch on the ground from Courage Breaker. If your graphics are set too low, this can make fighting the rogue class in particular a lot harder as well. Their stealth was a lot more potent at lower graphics the last time I tested it. Moving on to the interface scale. Make sure this is set high enough. If it's too small, the text in your chat box might be too small to read easily. In the HUD tab, you'll want to make sure you can see important things like player health bars and names. You should probably check that you can see damage and healing floaters as well. They are usually helpful. Though if you ever find yourself drowning in a cloud of damage floaters, you may want to consider turning those off instead. I don't think I've ever actually had to change anything in the HUD tab, but I would check your setup just in case. Next on to the chat tab. I highly recommend turning on show account names. This makes sure you know who you are talking to in PvP. If you are trying to report a player, I also recommend turning on the show date and time options before taking your screenshot. You'll probably want to turn off the profanity filter while you are at it. Now that we have covered option settings, let's move on to HUD. You'll want to go to the Rearrange HUD option. Then you'll want to spend some time moving those green boxes around to the places you want various things on your screen to appear. I also recommend taking a screenshot of your HUD setup when you are done and saving that on your desktop. The reason being is new modules and sometimes patches can reset your HUD settings. Next, let's go over launcher settings. When you are about to launch the game, go to the Options tab in the Neverwinter launcher. There you want to make sure to uncheck the on-demand patching option. So you want to uncheck the on-demand patching option. Leaving that blank can help reduce lag in-game, since you won't be downloading the non-essential files as you play the game anymore. Instead, your launcher will install the entire patch before you hit the play button. Next up, we have how good your gaming equipment is and whether or not your computer settings have been optimized. Aside from generally telling you to get a good computer, monitor, keyboard, mouse, desk, chair, and headset for gaming, this isn't something I have the know-how to explain to you in any sort of detail. You'll want to check that the reviews for anything you buy are real, and you probably should go for the best brands. By default, you'll want all of your equipment to have a cord attached to it, instead of trying to use wireless or battery-powered stuff. Also remember to take into account what you like and what makes you comfortable. If you have pets, take measures to guard your equipment from getting clogged with hair. Once you have better equipment, you'll want to make sure that it is all set up properly and optimized. I had help for that part, so it's not something I can really explain well. Another thing you may want to optimize is your chat box tabs and channels. You'll want to make sure you can see all of the channels that are important for PvP and maybe make some other changes while you're at it. You should also organize your inventory in a way that is helpful for PvPing. You don't want your PvP potions or things you like to swap to be inaccessible or hard to find. You should probably toggle your mounts tab to grid mode too. It's easier to find your mounts and powers that way. If you use Discord, make sure your push to talk key is set correctly for that. I use mouse button 5. Also make sure Discord is set to run as administrator in all places. On a closing note, let's go over 2 of the most important things for optimizing your performance in PvP. First, check what kind of internet connection you have. Do you have wired or wireless? If you currently use wireless, I highly recommend you change to a wired connection as soon as possible. I recently changed to a wired connection myself, and my connection is a lot smoother and more stable now. The second thing you'll want to check is how close you are to this game's server. If you are in Europe, you likely have a really high ping compared to people living in the USA. This isn't something you can really change for Neverwinter that I know of, other than physically moving closer to the server. But in other games, you are supposed to select the region you are from and the server you are located closest to. That is all for now, guys. See you next time.